fun in your community. The reading bug, it's my favorite place to be.
Hi, my name is Lauren. I'm the owner of The Reading Bug in San Carlos, California, and I'm here today with Miss Judy Schachner, who is the author of the legendary Skippyjon Jones series and many other fantastic books. And we're here today also to talk about her new book, Sarabella's Thinking Cap. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with Skippyjon Jones.
Okay.
And my kids laugh out loud at these stories, no matter how poorly I do the voice, and we want to hear you do the voice in a little bit, of course. Where did this crazy character originate?
That's very easy. Skippyjon Jones was our cat. He was a Siamese kitten. He had a very large head. He had huge ears, and he looked more like a chihuahua than a cat. And one morning he came down into the kitchen, had some kitty crunchies, went down into the basement, dug a tunnel to China, then followed by a pyramid. And then a bee came into our basement and stung him on top of his little noggin, and it began to swell. And I picked him up and I held him. I was so worried, and I said, Skippy, I'm going to have to take you to the veterinarian. And that was when the first milagro happened, and he said, Mamalita, I see the fire of love burning in your heart for me, and all I want to do is to stop, to drop, and to roll. And that's where it all began. Simple as that.
That is excellent. You have so many Skippyjon Jones books. Do you have a favorite?
Oh gosh, actually probably The Big Bones might be one of my favorites, because my daughter Emma is a paleontologist, and she said, I'll never forgive you if you don't do a book about Skippy and the dinosaurs. So I did, and she was my technical advisor on making sure the dinosaurs were not too fictionalized, that they were based in some reality. And I just love the fact that those little chihuahuas were on Mount Ichigamba doing the rumba. And there's that whole crazy, I don't know if you've read Big Bones yet, but there's a really crazy, strange chant in it. And I really remember doing that, just standing on my head to get it right.
Uh-huh.
So it is one of my favorites, the T-Mexito. And he, makes a big Jurassic bark. And so I'd say that was one of my favorites.
Excellent.
Snow White is one of my favorites too.
I like Snow White too. That's a nice
Yeah,
one.
that's
I
Snow
like the
Blue.
cover on that as well. I love the little face.
Yeah.
And the CD
It's
included in
adorable.
this one is always great. I love
Yeah, and my
listening to
daughter
those.
Sarah did the little bit of music. That's a little Skippy, fluffy, fuzzy little theme.
Oh.
That's Sarah. That's Sarabella. That's actually Sarabella wrote that music.
That's so neat. So you've been visiting schools throughout the country for many years.
26 years.
26 years.
Mm-hmm.
So okay. You need to tell me a little bit about Antonio Banderas.
Antonio Banderas?
Yes.
He's the love of my life. He is also the voice of the Nasonex bee. I have made many thousands of people say Nasonex, and nobody knows why they're saying it, but when they say it, oh yes, they know. So, Skippy also, around the time that I used to go to schools and talk about my cat, and if there was this, a Latino population in the schools, then whenever I spoke just a little bit of Spanish to those children, they brightened up. And I used to just tell a story about Skippy and how, he spoke to me with a Spanish accent. I studied Spanish in high school. I remember about 10 words, but I've always had a good ear for the sound of languages. Mm-hmm. And I loved, pretending to speak. And Skippy's 4 years old. He thinks he speaks Spanish. I know he doesn't really speak Spanish. Some people get mad at me because they think that I am making fun of them, and I'm not. It's all about a cat who feels more comfortable with a band of chihuahuas than he does with his sisters and his mother. Mm-hmm. She's a single parent. She was briefly married to Tom Jones. He wrote What's New Pussycat just for her. And, like tomcats, they leave their litters. Mm-hmm. So she works hard to raise her little kittens. Mm-hmm. But Skippy looks at his sisters. They have small heads. He has a big head. And he believes, I'm not a Siamese cat, I'm a chihuahua. So Antonio Banderas, at the time that I was telling this story in school, before it was a book, mm-hmm. we watched Zorro. And Zorro was my favorite television show, Disney television show, when I was a little kid, mm-hmm. back in the 50s, and I guess the 60s. And And then, of course, I'm watching Zorro with my family. And I hear Antonio Banderas say, I'm a great sword fighter. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I need to be. Well, Skippy began sounding like him.
Mm-hmm.
So when I spoke to my cat, he spoke to me as, oh yes. Yeah, oh yes.
Does Antonio know this?
Well, a long time ago, I would hope that because there are a few movie stars, and John Leguizamo loves Skippy, and I found out through that the drummer for Nine Inch Nails loves Skippy. My daughter is a composer, and she was doing something with the drummer from Nine Inch Nails, and somehow it came up that my mom writes children's books. He goes, really? Schachner sounds familiar. Yeah, she said Skippyjon Jones. He goes, oh my God, I read those to my kids every night. So and Gwyneth Paltrow, and there were a few people.
Yeah.
But I always heard him as the voice of Skippy.
Mm-hmm.
So years ago, we visited DreamWorks because, of course, some people have been interested in turning it into a movie. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned Antonio Banderas, and he said, well, I think he was maybe Puss in Boots was coming out.
Yes.
So people have said, oh, you should write to him or somehow tell him that he is the inspiration, and I figure if he could be the voice of a Nasonex bee, he wouldn't mind. I think this is like an upgrade.
I would say so.
Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, but Antonio, where are you?
Antonio,
Antonio,
oh,
come
yes,
to us.
Come to us. I will say Nasonex to you.
So let's talk about some of your other books. Dewey Bob. Dewey's a collector.
He is.
Now, go ahead.
No, he's a collector mainly of buttons and the lost and tossed things of the world. Mm-hmm. So his favorite shopping place is at the dump, where he'll take his fishing rod and he'll pull out a boot, or pull out an old spring or an old clock or whatever, and he makes art. Well, he repurposes and fixes the practical things. Mm-hmm. And then he will create something and he doesn't know what he's made, but you'll call it art, which was, I thought, what a lot of art in museums is kind of like, people don't really know what it is, but when you don't, you call it art.
And you have a lot of art in your home. What kind of inspirational pieces do you have there that you use?
Well, I have a favorite painter friend whose name is Perky Edgerton, and she is a wonderful painter, and I have quite a few of her paintings. I have a whole collection. We had a dog named Buster whose sole desire in life was to drive our car. He would spend sometimes 8 hours in the car. We couldn't get him out, not even with a piece of steak. And he would tremble when you came near. He was an adopted pit bull. He was white with a round circle around his eye. What was I saying? I'm tired.
That's okay. That is okay.
I was talking about
the art in the art in your home. The
so
paintings.
I have a lot of paintings that I've done of Buster over the years, and I have a lot of repurposed stuff that I picked up off the streets and repainted. And I paint doors. My mom died when I was really young, so I got to missing her one day, so I painted her portrait on my coat closet door with me sitting in her lap, so I get to see her every day. Yeah. I've painted Skippy and Buster and Tink on my front door, and when the UPS man came one day, he said, wait, are you Skippy? I said, yes, how did you know? He said, well, you painted him on your front door. So, I forgot. Yeah, so I have collections. I have a huge collection of buttons, and I wanted to use my buttons somehow in this book. So Dewey's kind of like me. He's also somewhat of an introvert. He spends his time alone until he realizes he's missing the best collection of the world, and that would be friends.
Wow. So let's move on to Sarabella, because this is your brand new book.
My brand new book.
And it's very, very beautiful. I think the art is my favorite of all of your books.
Thank you.
There's a few pages, especially the whale and the elephant, that are my two absolute favorites.
Thank you.
And for viewers on our Instagram page at readingbugbox.com or at readingbugbox, you can actually view a picture of our full window display with all of Judy's work.
Which is the most beautiful window display I have ever seen.
Thank you.
It is sparkly.
It is sparkly.
It has the pictures from the book. You must come by and see it. It's really beautiful, and I thank you from the bottom of my fuzzy.
Well, it's very easy to create art from art, I think. I mean, it's very inspirational what was in the book, and I think putting it out in a big display, I mean, that's just another way to view what's in a book. And I think sometimes I don't think art translates on the page as well as it does out in 3D. What do you think of that? I mean, so you have three-dimensional objects in your house.
I do.
And then you have to translate them to a page. Is that a challenge?
Well, mostly I would say, I wouldn't say I take or create my art from like three-dimensional things in my house so much as I might be inspired by the patina on a piece of old furniture, and that's true because I'm really into texture and I layer lots of paint, so I use a lot of acrylic gouache and pastel pencils and colored pencils, and I layer things. It's very labor-intensive artwork. So I'm really excited by old furniture with old beautiful patinas and colors coming through the top coat. So that's probably. But in Dewey, a lot of the buttons, those are my real buttons. So I made a photocopy of. I spread my buttons out on a piece of paper, and I photographed them and made a copy of them, and then I painted buttons too. So. But mostly it comes out of my head. It's just kind of stuff that, lives in a corner in the back of my brain. Yeah. I open the door. Come on.
Oh, one more story we have to talk about.
What?
Yo, Vikings.
Yo.
Yo.
Yo, if you're from Philadelphia, yo.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, just to make a short story long, Emma Schachner was turning 10 years old, and she wanted a Viking ship. And because she had learned about Eric the Red, and that was her Viking in school. She learned that the Vikings landed in America 500 years before Christopher Columbus. Didn't understand why we didn't get October 9th off, which was Leif Erikson's birthday. Why do we get Christopher Columbus Day? She used to wear a shirt to school that said Leif landed first. And,
good point.
So she wanted a Viking ship for her birthday. It makes sense. She didn't want a Lego kit. She didn't want one of those swing sets in the backyard that looked like a ship. She wanted a real Viking ship. Well, life is stranger than fiction. There was an advertisement in the Sunday paper, Philadelphia Inquirer. It said, Viking ship for sale, buy or burn. 29-foot Viking ship owned by a little old Norse woman who took it out on weekend raiding parties. And they went on to say that if they didn't sell it, they were going to burn it in the Schuylkill River, give it a Viking funeral. It was $7,000 a best offer. My husband showed it to Emma. Emma saw best offer. She convinced her little sister to shake out the piggy bank. They came up with $108 in nickels, dimes, and quarters. They wrote a very funny letter decorated with Viking ships. Sarah wrote Ina and Inga all over it. And Emma said, whatever you do, don't burn the boat. It would be a waste. Long live Odin. Send it to us. We can't afford it, but here. And she put in a little fox tooth and a baseball card to sweeten the deal. Well, nobody else made an offer for the ship. And we ended up with a 29-foot Viking ship in our backyard. And one day there was a knock at my door, and this burly truck driver was at the door, and he said, Philadelphia. Yo, lady, is that a Viking ship in your backyard? Because the dragon's head stuck up way over the bushes. And I said, yes. He said, you mind if I go out and climb on it? I said, no, go ahead. So I ran to my journal as he ran to the boat, and I wrote, Yo, Vikings. And I knew, my kids were grown by that time. And I knew that one day I would have to write that story. Yeah. And the strangest, and which I didn't tell today, and no one believes this story. Kids say, that's not real, until I show them the real ship. And then they go, whoa. Well, my daughters had gone off to school on their adventures. And when the ship got old and too decrepit, we gave it a Viking burial in the front yard. And we had this fern garden. And so there was a mound in our front yard. And I planted the tail on one end. And sometimes I put the dragon's head on the other. This time, this day, I had just had the tail. And there was another knock on my door. And we had new neighbors from Norway. Big, strapping blonde man. And he goes, I'm your new neighbor. How do you do? I'm Sven. And he said, yeah, is that a Viking ship you have buried in your front yard? And I said, as a matter of fact, it is. He said, well, I'm a shipbuilder. And he said, my papa was a shipbuilder, my grandfather. I'm a Viking man. And he said, I cannot believe I moved next door to a Viking ship, mound. I said, yes. You have moved into a strange neighborhood. So, but my girls were always grateful. They always said, Mom, giving us that ship made us realize you can go for your dreams. And it's the truth. Put a little elbow grease,
Thanks so much for tuning in. And look out for part 2 coming next week, where we'll learn about Judy's process from inception to the finished book. You can purchase Sarabella's thinking cap at thereadingbug.com or at your favorite independent bookstore across the country. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more fun and informative content about books and more.
your family store for books and more. It's filled with harmony. The reading bug, it's the happiest place to be.